Now we'll discuss relative and cumulative frequency. Let's begin by making a label for relative frequency in column C. In order to find relative frequency, what we do is we take each frequency divided by the total number of data points. Now in Excel, there's a way we can find the total automatically. I'll begin by typing a label for that total in A13. Anytime you create a new number in Excel, it's always good to have a label. Now there's a formula that Excel can use that's specifically built into Excel that can total up a group of numbers. So in this box that I've labeled with total, we can type this. First, an equal sign, telling Excel that there's some math coming, and then the word sum. This is a special command word in Excel that will allow you to add numbers together. Then, open a parentheses, and then, once that parentheses is open, we'll select the numbers that we intend to add together. After this, close the parentheses. For anybody who's new to Excel, just remember that opening a parentheses is the Shift 9 key, and closing the parentheses is Shift 0. So let's go to B13, which is where the total will appear. We'll say equals and the word sum. Notice that Excel brings up a list of special keywords that only Excel uses. We just want regular sum. Open the parentheses with Shift 9. We will now click on B2, this is our first data point, and draw a blue rectangle around all of these numbers that are in the frequency column, being careful to leave out the total. And again, if you miss and draw the rectangle incorrectly, it's okay as long as you keep the button held down. We'll release the button once we have our blue rectangle around all the frequencies. Press Shift 0 to close, and press Enter. Our total is 16 readings. To draw more attention to that, you can click Home, click the Paint bucket in the Font section, and I'm going to paint this gold. The reason I'm painting this gold is simply to show that the total will always be 16, even though we have a lot of different frequencies. Now that we have the total, let's calculate the relative frequency. Once again, 16 will always be your total. We need to tell Excel that that's the case. Excel by default is going to try to use a lot of different numbers for every operation. Excel needs us to tell it that the total will always be 16. Now, we can calculate the relative frequency by taking the frequency over the total. So, underneath relative, we can say equals, and click on the frequency directly next to it in B2. And then divide this by the total, which is in the gold box, the 16. But we must tell Excel that that 16 will always be the total no matter what happens to the frequency. To do this on a PC, press F4 after selecting the 16. This places dollar signs in front of and after the B. This is what tells Excel that the total will always be 16 for this problem. On a Mac, you can use function F4 instead. Now press Enter. And the relative frequency is 0. This is what we would expect with a frequency of 0. So once again, put dollar signs on the total. In math, this total, the 16, is what we refer to as a constant. Anytime you have a constant in Excel, we make sure to use the dollar signs. Now, we can calculate all of the relative frequencies immediately using Excel with this technique. Move your mouse over the bottom right corner of the box. You'll notice that your cursor changes from a white plus sign to a black cross. The black cross is what we call the formula tool. I'll take a picture of it now. Anytime you have a box selected, move your mouse to this position to get the formula tool. Once again, that will look like a black cross. To use the formula tool, click in the cell that contains the formula we just entered, move the mouse over this little knob in the lower right to get the black cross. Now, if you move too far, you'll get the 4 arrows. We don't want that. If you move too far to the left, you'll get the white plus sign again, and that won't help us here. It must be the black cross. Using your mouse, click while the black cross is displayed and hold the button down, and once again, draw your green rectangle. When you release the button, Excel will generate this list of numbers that applies the formula we had in cell C2 to all of the cells below it. This calculates the relative frequency for each of your groups. It is also possible to create a relative frequency histogram. Once again, we can select our relative frequencies using the white plus sign. Make sure that we have only the relative frequencies. We don't want the other frequencies involved in this. Go to Insert, and once again, we're going to select the first option in the chart section and go to 2D column. This will create our histogram. We'll make it smaller by using the diagonal arrows, and let's move it downward to make more room. Once again, let's add a new chart title. Double-click in the chart title, and we'll call this Relative Frequencies for Test Scores. Now we'll click off of that title, and then click on the green plus sign and add some axis titles. Now, our y-axis this time is not frequency, but relative frequency. We'll double-click, backspace the generic title, and say relative frequency. On the x-axis, once again, we'll have our scores. Double-click, delete the title, and we'll say scores. Once again, we will have to make an adjustment to our x-axis to get the correct labels in the right place. We right-click, we'll select data, we'll edit the horizontal labels, so click the Edit button here, and we select the list in column A that were our labels. We press OK, and now we have the new labels in place. Press OK one more time, and we can scroll down to view our graph. Once again, we have our correct labels here on the x-axis. The only thing left to do is go up to this ribbon in the upper left under Quick Layout and select option 8 to get our larger bars. This is in fact the same shape of our first histogram. The only difference is that now we are listing relative frequencies on the y-axis rather than the raw frequencies. There's another type of frequency we can calculate. It's called cumulative frequency. To calculate cumulative frequency, we take our frequency plus all previous frequencies. So here's how we can calculate cumulative frequency. Our first cumulative frequency will always be the same as the frequency we have in that row. For 0 to 9, we had none at all. However, we can arrange a formula that will calculate all the next cumulative frequencies. We can say the next cumulative frequency is the frequency to the left. This is in cell B3, Make sure not to select C3 because this will not use the relative frequencies, but rather the original frequencies in column B. Make sure that the frequency is in the same row as the cumulative frequency you're trying to calculate. And then we add the cumulative frequency above us. I'll demonstrate this again. We'll say equals the frequency on the left plus the cumulative frequency above us, giving us a cumulative frequency of 1. One more time, equals the frequency to the left, a plus sign, and then the cumulative frequency above. Notice it's still 1, even though our frequency in the 30 to 39 row was 0, because we're adding this frequency on the left plus all previous frequencies. Now to automate the rest of these operations, once again, we can use our formula tool. Move our mouse over this knob on the lower right-hand corner, get the black cross, click it, and move until we have a rectangle that covers all of the rest of the frequencies. And this calculates the cumulative frequency automatically for all of the classes we have. At the end, we get 16. Notice that's the same as the total frequency. This is what should happen. If you get a total cumulative frequency that's different from the total frequency you calculated previously, it's possible you've made an error at some point. Once again, we'll paint this gold. It's unlikely you'll ever be asked to make a histogram with cumulative frequency, but it's not unheard of. If you are asked to do this, you can simply calculate it in the same fashion that we did for the relative frequencies.